Welcome back to episode 222 of the Candlestick Kids Fantasy Football Podcast. Sorry for the late upload today. We are trying out a new schedule starting this week and so on. It'll be four, sometimes 5 to 6 episodes a week, but probably four is the baseline. So on Mondays, just so you don't get confused, it'll be me and Dweez Nuts on Twitter. You can go follow him at Dweez Nuts. He came on here prior and kind of helped me with my other brand, the Fantasy Stock Exchange. So we're going to be double uploading this on both channels, just so it's a little bit less work. I'm sure most of you guys know how it is, getting overwhelming nowadays. But today is quarterbacks to avoid. This is quarterbacks week for the channel in whole, and then the running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, and then we'll be doing a lot more as it comes down to it. Me and Dwayne will be doing 1 to 2 episodes a week in season, but for now, just once a week. So hope you guys like the show and do not draft these quarterbacks this year. I forgot to mention the name or the topic of the podcast, the video, but I mean, they probably saw it down below. So it's quarterbacks that we are avoiding. This can probably go in dynasty or redraft. I said redraft focus because it's what people care about the most, probably coming up here. So Dwayne, how you doing?
I'm all redraft on this one, man, because the guys that I'm avoiding in redraft are not necessarily the guys I'm avoiding on Dynasty. So it's redraft here.
Redraft.
Baby.
Okay, redraft.
No, I'm doing great. I'm very sick. My throat's all fucked up. So who knows? I might start like hacking some shit up in the middle of this thing. And if I do, just deal with it.
You're probably going to do that because the players are gross. I mean, that's probably why you're going to do it,
yeah,
I guess.
We could just roll along with it. I don't have a beer or a shot for the people today because I literally can't. I tried. I experimented with just a sip of a beer, and it felt like a fucking flamethrower had been taken to my throat. I couldn't handle it. I'm a bitch, and I apologize to the people. I know I let you down, but it is what it is.
They'll see you next week. We'll be here next week too, and the week after, and the week after that. So first up, quarterback that you should not be drafting. I'm going to go first this time. Aaron Rodgers. I pulled different ADPs because I realized that people use all different whack ADPs, and none of them matters until the ADP of your actual draft. So Fantasy Mojo, the site we use, QB12, Fantasy Football Calculator, free site, QB10, and the Fantasy Pros ADP Consensus, QB9.
Let me stop you for a second. Are those all redraft ADPs? Or
yeah, they're all redraft. All the ADPs are redraft. I guess you could just apply maybe some of the stuff to Dynasty, but don't think about that too hard. So as you can see, his ADP really hasn't dropped from last year. He was going at like the QB 4 or 5 last year, if I remember right. And you'd think after the season he had last year would drop maybe to like the 14, 15 range. So last year he had all the opportunity in the world. 8th in pass attempts, 4th in red zone attempts, 2nd in deep attempts, and 5th in air yards attempted. And that resulted in 15 fantasy points per game, 8th in passing touchdowns, which was like 2 above like 14th in passing touchdowns. So it wasn't that big of a gap, and 11th in passing yards, and his completion percentage was 2.8% less than expected, or his CPOE, which is completion percentage over expectation. So as you can see, he was just not good last year with the opportunity, because some people just think it was because they ran the ball a lot, but in reality, they really didn't. They were just a good offense that had the ball for a good time possession because they just kept turning the clock because they had a good run game. And I think the one thing that probably saved him the most, and the graphic on the screen you'll see is from RotoViz. It's just his fantasy output from last year. The bar charts are the fantasy points he scored every week, and the lines throughout it are the black one is the weekly QB 12, so the weekly QB 12, and all the area higher would have been a QB 1 of the week, and from the red to the black would have been a QB 2 for the week. So as you can see, he had some boom games. In those boom games, I'm pretty sure he threw like 5 touchdowns in every single one, 4 or 5 touchdowns. So it's not like he was throwing the ball, completing a lot of yards, like 300, 400 yards. He was just throwing 4 to 5 touchdowns. And then the games below that were just bad. Like, you don't want him in the lineup in those games. So really what it comes down to is you're drafting him based on name. There's a ton of different pivots left over that behind him, Stafford, Jared Goff, Burrow, as gross as that is to say it, I'd probably take Burrow over Aaron Rodgers. I'm sure Big Ben's down there. I'm sure Tannehill's down there. I'm not really for sure the rest, but it's just not a good spot. And then they go out and draft Aaron Jones, and that's been sort of the narrative all year. So I looked at the splits, which is now on the screen. The 13, so in split, is the games they won. So there was a plus point differential. And out of split, the 3 games, the games they lost. Do you know if there's a site where you can do it by win trailing and win leading, because like that's not like necessarily win trailing, win leading, but it's like when winning and losing, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know that there is a play. Not that I know. I mean, I can look right now.
Mm-hmm.
No, I'm not.
No, I mean, I was just thinking like in general because I was trying to like figure that out. But basically, the 13 games, as you can see, the pass attempts and rushing attempts, 7 more passing attempts than rushing attempts. But in the games they lost, that shifted to 41 passing attempts and 19 rushing attempts. So in reality, you wanted him to come from behind the Aaron Rodgers we all know, coming back, throwing Hail Marys. That was still there last year. But then you go down and look at their schedule, and they're projected to win 9 to 9.5 games, depending on the book you go to. They only play 3 teams with win totals projected higher than them, meaning if you really break it down, 3 teams that they're going to be trailing behind if you just compare win totals. So really, you're banking out a quarterback that's not very efficient last year and only going to be throwing the ball 34 times a game. I just don't see much really upside in there, and especially because quarterbacks in general, if you're not taking one early, you're just taking upside chances, streaming chances anyway. So I just think he's a guy that I'll probably fade. Superflex, I mean, I'm okay with him as my QB2 in Superflex, but I know I'm not going to be getting him there unless I go QB. So I would just probably avoid Aaron Rodgers altogether. Probably just in general, probably. ADP, yes, but I think it's just kind of a more of a headache than it is a success to have him on your team.
I'm going to challenge you a little bit on Rodgers here. Obviously, as a Bears fan, I don't love him, but for a long time, he's been a good fantasy quarterback. A couple of the things that I'm concerned about when I start thinking about, do I fade him, do I not fade him? One, Aaron Jones' touchdown numbers are coming down. Do we agree on that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if Aaron Jones' touchdown numbers come down, let's say he has 6 less than he did last season, which would still be a really nice touchdown total for the kid. Do you imagine any of those go the passing route, or are they all going to go straight to A.J. Dillon? What do you think? You said yourself he was 4th in red zone passing attempts. Unfortunately, not a lot of those ended up in touchdowns. Aaron Jones ended up having an extraordinary amount of those. So one concern I would have is that some of those are going to shift back to the Aaron Rodgers red zone passing touchdown that we've seen for so many years.
Yeah, it's tough because I don't know if there's a good answer to that question, because like my thinking would be, yes, they're going to go down due to the fact that we think Dillon's going to be more of a goal line threat than Aaron Jones is. But Aaron Jones is really, really good on the goal line. Like, yes, he had a lot of volume, but he was very efficient on the goal line. So you'd think maybe they just give it to him again. But then there's also the fact that, like you said, say he goes down to 10, which is like top 3 rushing touchdown. Like, if he gets that next year, he'll be top 3 for sure. Does that go to Rodgers? I don't know, because I mean, if he's not throwing to Devontae Adams, who's he throwing the ball to in the red zone? So like, it's a tough question.
Yeah, that's one of the big points that weighs in your favor, right? Because it's Devontae Adams, and then everybody else on that team is a trash receiving option. I don't know. Maybe Devin Funchess can actually play football after missing a season, but that definitely goes in your favor. The other concern I would have is, you said yourself, from behind, he throws it a lot more. Matt LaFleur is willing to throw it a lot more from behind. I don't think they're going to win 13 games this year. I mean, if you take 3 of those away and give them a 10-6 season, even last season, what does that do to where Aaron Rodgers finished? What does that do to his point total, his yardage total, his attempts total? I think there's room for regression the other way here. I don't think he should go. Where did you say he was going? I don't think he should go as high as 10 is probably
10,
about right. It's about right for me. But there's a little concern when you tell people to fade him. I see the point. There's just a couple of factors that make me sort of hesitate.
Yeah, and it's tough. Tell. Yeah, because like, I mean, we even talked about it. Like, I was like pulling hairs to find guys for like quarterbacks, because like I thought in my head there was so many, and then you go and look at their real life football stats and how they played, and then compare that to their fantasy, and it's like, wow, he was actually like not a bad option. So yeah, I think it's just more avoid in a sense, but like just pause your expectations. Maybe
it's all about the expectations. Yes.
Yeah, just look to Joe Burrow, Jared Goff.
Maybe a good time just to remind the people, our weekly reminder to people, that you can fade guys all day, but everybody's worth it at a price somewhere, right? So we're not saying do not draft these guys at all. Like, there's always a time to draft these guys. Make sure you're getting the right value for them. And maybe the value that you should be looking at them is a little bit lower than where they're going right now is really what we're arguing here.
Sure.
I didn't think it was that hard picking some quarterbacks to fade. I'm going to give you some names that are a little more ballsy than I think what you did. Low-hanging fruit there. I'm going to say, right off the top, I think we need to really take a step back from Deshaun Watson. I'm concerned about Deshaun Watson. My original rankings, my original projections had him at QB 13. I think I've said that on the show before. Since then, I think he's at 11 or 12 now. He's come up just a little bit as I kind of tinker with these numbers all off season. Every little thing that happens, we make changes. So nothing's locked in stone. Now, between now and September, God knows how many things are going to change. But right now, I'm telling you to fade Deshaun Watson. So his ADPs, same thing. Fantasy Mojo is QB5. These are redraft. He's a little higher in Dynasty, but in redraft, Fantasy Calculator's got him at 6, and at Fantasy Pros, he's at 6 as well. So all pretty consistent there. There's two big reasons why I'm telling you need to lower your expectations for Deshaun Watson and maybe lower your expectations by quite a lot on this guy. The first one, you can't ignore the elephant in the room. He lost the best weapon that he'll ever have on his receiving core when DeAndre Hopkins gets traded off of this team. The bottom line is that he is a quarterback's best friend. It's undeniable that his catch radius, his ability to push himself open at any given time, to catch anything that's anywhere near him, his red zone threat, these things are undeniable. And none of the receivers that are coming onto this team do those things. None of these receivers that are coming onto this team are even wide receiver ones. They're not X receivers. They're all complementary. But without somebody to complement it, time will tell what they can actually do. The most telling statistical differential that I saw here when I was looking at this was this. So you can find the quarterback's accuracy rating. Otherwise, how often do they throw an accurate pass? Player Profiler, I think, does this one. And then you can also see their completion percentage ranking. So presumably, in a perfect situation, in a vacuum, an accuracy rating and a completion percentage rating would be pretty close. Now, they're not that way, and a large part of that is because of the receiving core. There are receivers that are better at catching inaccurate passes. When it comes down to it, that's what it is. In 2019, Deshaun Watson was the 15th most accurate quarterback in the league, but had the 8th best completion percentage. In 2018, his only other almost full season, he was the 22nd most accurate quarterback in football, and he had the 8th best completion percentage in football. That's a big difference in both of those seasons. And while it's not always as cut and dry as this, I'm telling you right now that DeAndre Hopkins was the reason. In 2018, I can tell you that DeAndre Hopkins had 46 inaccurate but quote-unquote catchable passes, which was it's a huge number, by far and away more than anybody else in the league. And he caught 76% of those. Do you know how many receivers in the league had 76% total catch percentage last year? Not that many, right?
Like 6, 7 maybe. Yeah.
So the point is DeAndre Hopkins catches everything, whether it's accurate or not. Does Brandon Cooks do that? No. Is Randall Cobb going to do that for you? No. Kenny Stills? I mean, there's not a guy on this team left anymore that can do that. So right out of the gates, when I'm doing my projections, I have to lower Deshaun Watson's completion percentage. And when you lower, he's not going to throw the ball more than he did last year. He's going to complete less passes. He's going to get less yards out of it, less touchdowns. All that happens when there's less catches, right? So right out of the gates, we have to do that. The bigger area of concern for me when you lose Nook, though, is in the red zone. In the last 3 seasons, while Deshaun Watson has been playing in games, Hopkins has had 19 touchdowns from inside the red zone. That's over basically 35 games or whatever it is, 36 games. That's a really nice number. He's finished inside the top 3 at that position more often than he's not touchdowns from the red zone. That's a big thing that you're losing. It's a big target. Now, I know a Darren Fells came on late last season, to do a lot of red zone work. But if we're relying on Darren Fells or even Jordan Akins and the pair of them to do the red zone reception work that DeAndre Hopkins is vacating on this team, then by all means draft Deshaun Watson as high as you want him to. I'm not going to lean on these two tight ends that you couldn't have named for me 8 months ago. My second big concern about Deshaun Watson is in the rushing game. So, last season, 500 yards, 600 yards the season before that. He does a lot of work for you on the ground, Deshaun Watson does. He's going to continue to do a lot of work for you on the ground. But I'm going to assert right now that he's going to do less work for you on the ground in 2020 than he has in the past. First off, we go from Lamar Miller and Carlos Hyde are the two feature backs that he's played with. If you want to sit and tell me that David Johnson is not more physically, athletically talented than those two guys, then I'm done with this conversation because you're being fucking ridiculous. Even with Lamar Miller and Carlos Hyde, though, running backs on a Bill O'Brien Houston Texans team get work. Lamar Miller averaged I think, number 10 at total carries for running backs. Carlos Hyde had the 12th most carries of all the running backs in the league last year, even though he was sharing work with Duke Johnson. My expectation is David Johnson gets 270-plus carries this year. Hyde had 240 last year, okay? So some of those carries, look, Duke Johnson's still going to play, but some of those carries are coming from Deshaun Watson's share of that work. It's going to happen this season. Bill O'Brien, now GM of his team, he's the guy that decided to honor the $10 million contract for David Johnson rather than attempt to renegotiate. Obviously, he has intention on using this guy. He's always wanted to have a really good feature back. He's always tried to have a good feature back, even though he's never had a very talented back. He's got one right now. The big concern, again, here comes down to the red zone, though. It comes down to that touchdown work. Last season, Deshaun Watson had 7 rushing touchdowns. 5 of those came from inside the 5-yard line. That's because Carlos Hyde is not and has never been a very efficient goal line back. It's not something he can do. Lamar Miller has never been a good goal line back. David Johnson, on the other hand, has always been a good goal line back. He's been right around the top 4 or 5 at that statistical category whenever he's played. Now, I know he's not always playing, but whenever he's played, he's been pretty efficient there, right around 60% success rate, which is really good. I think 3 backs last season would have beat his career number of about 60%. So I expect David Johnson to get a lot more work this season than running backs have in the past. I expect David Johnson to get a lot more goal line work. He's going to take that right away from Deshaun Watson because he can do it and Deshaun Watson doesn't have to. Those are the times when your quarterback gets hurt, when he's sprinting for the pylon and 2 linebackers and a D-end are chasing him. That's not what anybody wants on the Houston Texans organization. So look, I'm giving you a stat line here. This is what I think Deshaun Watson's going to do this year. 3,500 passing yards, 24 passing touchdowns. That's got to come down from the 26 or 7 he's done in the last couple of years. 13 interceptions. I think he'll have 400 rushing yards and still 4 rushing touchdowns. So I'm not taking a shitload of numbers away from this guy, to be honest. A little bit here and there comes down, and that was enough to drop him down to my QB 12. It's time to fade this guy because those are going to be good numbers for him at the end of the year. Those are reasonable numbers for him at the end of the year, but they're just not good enough to put him at the 5 or 6 where he's being drafted.
Yeah, it's just – I think it's too obvious to drop him, and I think the only way he could counteract that is by getting fluky fantasy points. And by that I mean he throws 3 touchdowns, all 60-yard bombs to Cooks, Fuller, Stills. Kute plays the slot. If
Will Fuller plays all 16 games, then he might have 4 3-touchdown games. He might have 5 3-touchdown games, maybe. But that's not likely to happen. Could it happen? Yes. It's just not likely, and that's what we have to go on when we're making these projections.
Yeah, I mean, but in reality, like when I make my first run of rankings right now, it's Lamar, Mahomes, Dak, Russ, Kyler. I'm flirting with Josh Allen and Matt Ryan over him. Matt Ryan just comes so high on Calvin Ridley and Hurst and Julio. You have to be. But yeah, I think it's just a spot where, like, unless you're getting him at like the QB 7 or 8, like it's not worth the pick. QB 13 based on stat line, yeah. I just think his talent will get him like a low end QB1 no matter what. No matter how bad the situation is, he will be a QB1, I think, on a per game basis. And I think the combination of Cooks, Stills, Fuller, Cobb, David Johnson, Fells will somehow work out some games. So we'll kind of see how that plays out. But yeah, I think we're not saying like he's going to be terrible at fantasy, but it's definitely like, why take him as the QB4 when you can just go take Matt Ryan probably 5 rounds later most of the time in main redraft leagues, and he's going to put up the same numbers for sure.
I would have Drew Brees over Deshaun Watson 10 out of 10 times this season. In redraft, sure. Fuck yes. For
sure. Next up here, another young quarterback with a lot of potential in quotes for this guy, Baker Mayfield. And listen, we've been getting 1 or 2 guys in the comments saying like, what is that take? Or that's a terrible take, or like whatever. One of these times,
if everybody agreed with us all the time, then they wouldn't watch. There's no reason to watch if we're just saying what you already think.
One of these days, people will realize Baker Mayfield is not a good quarterback. All right. Yes, he's a good quarterback because he's in the NFL. There's only 32 starting quarterbacks. In reality, there's only like 20 starting quarterbacks that play for a long time. But he was not good last year. Everyone wants to blame the offensive line for not giving him much time to throw. That's why he couldn't hit the injured receiver Odell, who just isn't good, and this slot receiver Jarvis Landry. But listen, PFF does a QB annual like PDF book database thing. I don't know. It's like 400 pages. I just control F and pull up stats from it. His QB grade from a clean pocket ranked 26th among all quarterbacks. And you'd be like, okay, well, if his QB grade under pressure is bad, then yeah, the O-line was just bad. Nope, he was 5th under pressure. So the O-line had nothing to do with it. Like, there was no reason why the O-line had to affect it. They were 10th in adjusted line yards, 18th in pass protection, so right around average. He took 1 sack above league average. He took an average amount of sacks that probably 16 other quarterbacks take the same amount every year, and league average time to throw.
Sounds like if the line was worse, he'd have been better off.
Yeah. Then they got better. I'm not saying Jedrick Wills and Jack Conklin make the O-line make him worse, but I'm saying like you can't use that as a positive or a negative because he was good with a bad O-line last year. His final like stat line was 500 yards over expectation. How that's calculated is a combination of volume, passing attempts, team trends, situational splits, stuff like that. So he actually outperformed what he was projected. That's to show that this offense is not made for fantasy quarterbacks, right? But now it gets even worse. Kevin Stefanski comes in. People are going to be like, oh, the analytical guy is going to come in and he's going to make this team better by running better plays, blah, blah, blah. Kevin Stefanski last year was the OC of the Vikings. He ran the offense. They ran the ball the highest in the red zone at 60%. And I'm pretty sure the Browns were like 3rd at like 52%, if I remember right. So 8% more. They ran the ball, I think, at a 57.8%, 51% run rate compared to the Browns' 42% run rate. So that's more runs. They brought back Kareem Hunt. They actually gave a second-year tender to him, showing that they want to run the ball. They go out and get Jack Conklin, probably the best run-blocking O-lineman or O-tackle, not a very good pass blocker. They get Austin Hooper, really good run blocker. They get Harrison Bryant in the draft, really good run blocker. So everything's showing that they want to run the ball. And if you're going to take an offense where he outperformed expectation and was QB, I don't even know what he was in points per game. I got to pull it up here. QB, it was like 20-something in points per game. I think it was 20. So he outperformed expectation at QB 20 in points per game. And now they're going to run the ball more, limiting his passing attempts. Like, what is there to add up? Like, unless they somehow is like, I don't think we're going to run the ball in the red zone anymore with Nick Chubb and Kareem out. We're just going to throw the ball to injured Odell and Landry, who just got surgery like 4 months ago. Like, there's no value there. I get he's at QB 15, and I get he might fall down to QB 20 sometimes, but, like, you're banking on a subpar Kirk Cousins fantasy performance for him this year. And that's a terrible comp because Stefanski was the coach for him, but it's literally the same exact team. Stefanski literally is replicating the Vikings team. And I know everyone hates having Kirk Cousins on their fantasy team because he doesn't provide the upside that you want. And Odell is kind of part of this conversation. I put a thread on Twitter breaking down his injury performance last year and his article that Rich Rebar did for Sharp Football Analysis, breaking down alpha wide receiver switching team. So in year 2 of the new team for switching in the top 24 ADP in that year. So Odell is definitely in the top 24 ADP for wide receivers. The average point differential in terms of total fantasy points dipped 26% out of 11 receivers in the sample. 26% fantasy point dip from whatever he had last year. I don't even know what it was. So it's just not good. Like there's no upside unless he's going to come out here and throw 40 touchdowns. But like, have you ever seen Kirk Cousins throw 40 touchdowns? Like, no. So it's not going to happen. I just don't. I wasn't on the Browns last year, and I'm not going to do it again this year just because they added 2 run blocking guys. Because in reality, it's not going to change anything that they already weren't good at. So I'm just going to fade Baker. QB2 in a super flex, yeah, sure, but most people don't play super flex. QB2 and super flex can be anywhere from Jared Goff all the way down to Tyrod Taylor at any given week. So the QB2 is not really a spot where like I have Baker Mayfield as my QB2 because you want a higher upside player in that QB2 spot.
Yeah, I'm totally off. Fuck Baker.
Fuck so Baker. Bad. Like, I don't know. So everyone's like, he threw 27 touchdowns in his rookie year. Well, he should when you're losing every game. I hope he can throw 2.2 touchdowns a game his rookie year when they were down every single game. Like,
yeah, I don't buy it. And you know, people give you numbers all day long about why it happened last year and why he's going to be better this year. But like the bottom line is every time I watched a Browns game last year, I watched him play football and I thought, what the fuck is he doing? Like he looks like shit on the field. So my eye test is maybe more important than any analytic numbers we can look at. And it says stay the fuck away. So I know earlier I said we're not saying don't draft these guys at all. But for Baker, I'm saying don't fucking draft these guys at all.
Love it.
Fuck that guy. I'm going to hit you with one more. It's Carson Wentz, who's going either the QB 10, 11, 12, right in that range, depending on where you want to look for your ADP. I believe he's my quarterback 24 right now, which again seems really extreme to a lot of people. And again, it's an early ranking system, early projections. All that stuff will change a little bit, although he did bump down a little more just a couple of days ago, and I'll tell you why in just a second. 3 reasons why I think you should fade Carson Wentz this year. The first reason is my rushing concern for this. So in 2019, last season, you know, the first season that he was really fully healthy after he hurt his back real badly, broke his back, right? Let's call it what it is. He ran the ball 62 times, 7th most in the NFL, only 243 yards, but that was 10th most in the NFL. He had a rushing touchdown, just the one. I believe those numbers come down even further from where they were last year. Look, Miles Sanders emerged in the second half of the season. Boston Scott emerged as a really solid option for this team. They add an undrafted free agent running back that I really like, that I think is going to find his way onto the field this year, and Michael Warren. Just a couple days ago, the news comes out, Brandon Brooks, their stud right guard, one of the best guards in all of football, tears his ACL, out for the entire season. All these things say, I think, Carson Wentz in this run game is not necessarily going to thrive as he may have in the past, or it may look like he was ready to in the past. I think he's going to have less designed runs this year because there are other guys that can do it. And now there's a concern right there on that strong side of that line. Last season, those 3 guys on the right side of that line all went to the Pro Bowl because they were some of the best run blocking offensive linemen in the league. You lose the one right in the middle. That's a problem that scares me as a coach, a play caller, especially if I've got a quarterback that's been injured in the past. Look, if we just look at the numbers from last season and take his 62 carries and drop it down to 45 carries and keep all the averages the same, that would have dropped him from his finish at quarterback 9 to quarterback 12. So you see how easy it is for these guys to fall when we get in that middle range there. So concerning. My second concern has got to be this guy's receivers. We saw last year the team lost all of their fucking receivers. Right now, I believe their starters right now, if I'm making the depth chart, going to be Alshon Jeffrey, Deshaun Jackson, Marquise Goodwin. Well, news a few days ago says Alshon Jeffrey doesn't actually have a timetable for his return yet from his Liz Frank injury last year. You know what that Liz Frank injury is? It's nasty. Mm-hmm. It's fucking nasty, and you certainly can't come play until you're ready. Alshon Jeffrey has had a hard time staying on the field over the course of his entire career. He's getting a little older, so that's a concern. And if we just look at Alshon Jeffrey and ignore the rest of these guys, Carson Wentz has a really, really, really definitive split between Alshon Jeffrey on the field and Alshon Jeffrey off the field while they've been on the field. 56 games, so it's a good size sample that we can look at here, and we can get some really good trends. With Jeffrey on the field, 2 touchdowns per game passing for Wentz. Without him on the field, 1. With him on the field, half an interception per game, 0.8 with him off the field, which is a fairly sizable jump. And 257 to 247, so you got less yardage passing as well. Not as big of a jump, but this is a big deal. You lose an entire touchdown per game over the last 56 fucking times that this kid has played football when Alshon Jeffrey's not on the field. And at this point, I would not be surprised if he misses early. He may even land on the pup because he's never been a quick healer. So concerning. Fun fact, when you look at the other splits on this field, I know last season when all the receivers got hurt, Dallas Goedert, Zach Ertz really stepped up and became solid receiving options for this kid. So I was just looking at the splits, and Goedert doesn't make a big difference at all, him on the field or off the field. But statistically, in his career, Wentz has performed better statistically and for fantasy football with Ertz off the field than on, which I thought was really –
It makes sense, though. I mean, like – the concept of Ertz is first downs, yes. First down. Like, so like it makes sense. And in perspective to the way the offense runs when the receivers are healthy, like it's electric because Peterson's such a good coach. But yeah, it's weird. It's weird because there's so what's like the sample size? Like my thinking would be like, because maybe there's 40 games with Ertz and 3 without him, something like that.
No, it was it wasn't big. I wanted something maybe 8, 9. I don't remember off the top of my head, but it wasn't nearly as big as what we have with the Alshon Jeffrey split. Yeah, so are people seeing some of these things on the screen while we're talking?
I toss them up whenever you start talking about them.
Great. All right, so let's talk about that starting 3 receiving core on that team right now. Let's say it's Alshon, Deshaun Jackson, Marquise Goodwin. That's the plan going into the season. I assume that's the plan going into the season. Will Rager find his way out there? I don't know. But those 3 guys, on the average age between those 3 is 31 years old. Okay, not a single one of them has started 16 games in either of the last 2 seasons. Last season, they averaged 6 games on the field between them. 2018, they averaged 10 games on the field between them. So, look, we can say, hey, his receivers are going to be healthy to start the season, so he's got to be better. But the guys that they have don't stay healthy. They don't stay on the field. Even Goodwin, who they went and traded for, has a hard time staying on the field. I am very concerned about the receiving core on this team. Yes, you've got Rager coming in. Yes, John Hightower was drafted. Quez Watkins on the team. J.J. Arcega-Whiteside last year. So we got a lot of young names that are going to be stepping into a role on this team and maybe filling in some of those injury spots and solving this problem for the team. But we're talking redraft right now, and rookie wide receivers do not perform like somebody like Alshon Jeffrey could if he were on the field, at least not in year 1. J.J. Arcega-Whiteside had a really hard time really getting it going last season. I don't expect a whole lot from him this year either. So if his stud wide receivers or his 3 starters get hurt, stay old, whatever they always do, you have to expect a performance dip, a production dip, just because of the age of the guys coming in. Because even an exciting rookie wide receiver is still just top ceiling for a rookie wide receiver somewhere around 28 to wide receiver.
Last year was like the only exception. But in reality, I don't know the actual finishes. My guess is A.J. Brown was like QB, wide receiver like 19, 18.
Yeah.
And his was super inflated by lack of other targets type things. So, yeah, I mean, like there was a report that came out the other day, saying that like the report on Roto World, so what it showed was I wouldn't be surprised if Rager leads the team in targets.
Which is going to be a problem for Carson Wentz, a big problem if Rager leads the team in targets.
The way if you actually clicked on the Roto World thing and then clicked on the link to the actual article, it was led receivers in targets, not tight ends, not Miles Sanders. So like the way it was worded was like that the receiving core is fine, and it's not. I mean, like Alshon Jeffrey, he's not playing this year. They literally try to trade him every single year, and they can't because they front loaded his contract. And when he plays, it's not like he's moving the needle. Deshaun Jackson will get hurt. Goodwin will get hurt. So you're looking at Rager, Hightower, and Watkins, who I think that could be effective with
Eventually.
with having Ertz and Goddard. Like that's a pretty weird trio that I think could actually work. But yeah, it's weird how they put themselves in this position every year and somehow do good. Like they've never like the last time they had an alpha was probably 5 years ago when Alshon Jeffrey was actually like an alpha receiver in the league, maybe 4 years ago.
Jeffrey's still a stud for Carson Wentz when he's on the field. I mean, he's not a top name guy in the league, no, but he's fine. If Alshon Jeffrey, Deshaun Jackson, and Marquise Goodwin play the bulk of this season, you might get a return on your QB 11, 10, 12 draft pick. Maybe there's a potential there, but the chances of that happening are so slim. And if these young guys come in, even if they perform well for rookie receivers, and Dallas Goedert and Zach Ertz go ape shit, like the numbers just come down. They have to. Mm-hmm. My last concern is Jalen Hurts, and I want to explain that for a second. I know he wasn't drafted to come in and take over. He's not going to take over. You know, does he sometimes get in as a quote unquote change of pace quarterback? Maybe. It wouldn't surprise me if he ends up with 25 rushes on the season, 20 carries on the season as he comes in and kind of takes over even some more of that rushing work. But even if he doesn't, this team drafted Jalen Hurts because they know they need an insurance policy against their quarterback, a 27-year-old quarterback who has broken his back, broken his wrist, broken his ribs, torn an LCL, torn a PCL already in his 4-year career. If the team is spending that kind of draft capital, would they draft him like 58 somewhere in the middle of the second round?
Yeah, like it was 53 to 58 range.
If the team is using that kind of draft capital to draft an insurance policy, then I'm concerned as a fantasy owner, and I need my insurance policy is just not drafting him as my QB1. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, at 10, 11, even 12, that's about a QB1 unless you went really early. And I don't like to go quarterback early. So no thanks for me. I'll give you my stat line and my projections right now. I got him just under 4,000 passing yards this year, 26 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, 185 rushing yards, and 1 touchdown on the ground still. So good numbers, but that would have been good enough for quarterback 20 in 2019, right? Like I'm not trying to take away all of his production, but it's just not enough for me to want anything to do with him where he's being taken.
Yeah, I think the thing with him is like it's tough for me to say that he's going to dip off because he would have last year, he would have the year before that with the lack of weapons, but the fantasy value like is just nothing to write home about because his ADP always catches up to him. It always puts him at the 8 to 11, which when you're drafting a guy at 8 to 11, like there's not a definitive list because, like I said, there really is no such thing as ADP when it comes down to it. Like it's whoever your guys you're drafting with want to draft,
right?
But you're drafting him like the ADP. I don't know how to say there's no ADP gap in terms of where they fall on the draft board. Eighth quarterback is probably 6 rounds ahead of QB 13. And QB 13, like I've been mentioning Jared Goff, like as bad as we think he played last year, he was a good fantasy quarterback. I don't know, Ryan Tannehill, guys like that, those are just as good as Carson Wentz. So like he'll never reach that point where he's going to become a value because he's such a good quarterback, no matter who he plays with, that he in real life, that he continues to produce. We see him in like there's a lot of when people see something happen in the playoffs, they like to take that into the next year. We see this every year with fantasy. When they see it in prime time, they think things like Jared Goff sucks because he didn't provide fantasy points for my team. Leonard Fournette sucks because he had all the volume and it was only running back 6, like stuff like that. That's like they're dumb narratives. Like they don't evaluate fantasy potential. And I think that I'm not dissing on Carson Wentz. I just said he's going to finish as probably QB 12, but it's per points per game. It'll probably be QB 15 to 16 with the 80% chance he gets hurt and misses 3 games. So yeah, he's just not a guy that, I mean, if you're getting like the QB 15, 16, yeah, like smash that. But in reality, too, you're never, like I said, you're never going to be getting him that low because people respectively just like that. They just know that he's a good quarterback when it comes down to it.
Yeah. I mean, oftentimes you draft the name for whatever reason, the name gets stuck in your head. Pivot a little bit, just a general quarterback strategy. Can we do that for a couple of minutes before we leave?
Yeah.
So I told you when I was talking about Wentz, if you would have taken 17 carries away from him, he would have dropped 3 spots from 9 to 12. This is something people don't understand. When you get past the first tier of quarterbacks, maybe the first 2 tiers, once you get past quarterback 6, maybe 7, that next group of 5 to 8 quarterbacks are separated by a touchdown. They're separated by, 200 passing yards. There's almost no difference between, and you mentioned it, I just want to highlight this. There's almost no difference in points between the quarterback 8 and the quarterback 14. So if you're spending, 5 rounds earlier draft capital to get the 8 instead of waiting, loading up in other positions and getting the 15, you're fucking up. That's not a good strategy. When it comes to quarterbacks, I've never been a draft early guy, but I understand the people that do, because it's either you take the top tier guys who are going to outperform everybody else by a good chunk, or you have to wait and take the value of even like a Ben Roethlisberger who's going late as fuck, but is going to finish within, a couple of touchdowns worth of fantasy points as somebody like Carson Wentz, as far as I'm concerned. Phillip Rivers has every chance of finishing in that same humongous tier of tier 4 quarterbacks. So wait.
Yeah, I think the way I look at it as, if you're going early, it has to be safe, right? So, like I said, when I was looking through what quarterbacks were bad, there was not many. Thinking that you'd want to go QB late, but in perspective to, we're trying to find players to avoid. A lot of guys have decent floors that you can makeshift streamers. You can play the schedules. When it comes to early, I think Lamar, I know we kind of have different viewpoints. I think that's a guy in the 3rd round in single quarterback leagues you can take because his rushing floor, like I said, it might not be the season he had last year,
he'll be fine.
He won't disappoint you.
Yeah.
Mahomes could, because last year the whole team took a step back in efficiency. We've only seen Mahomes be the QB1 when he threw 50 touchdowns. So you have to bank on that again. Russell Wilson, I love Russell Wilson in fantasy this year because I kind of finally bought into there's never going to – the pass run split's never going to change, but his fantasy finish is never going to change either. So I think I just sort of shifted my mindset as he's actually a really good value where he goes every year.
He's as safe as it comes. I mean, he does not have the ceiling of any of the guys in my tier 1, which is the only reason he's not in tier 1. He's never going to have a 4-touchdown game, 420-yard passing game, but he's always going to have 280 yards and 2 touchdowns and some yards rush. I mean, he's always going to be right. His floor is insane.
So, I think that's why, he's a good investment because he won't disappoint you. Dak, good pick. We saw last year the team only got better. Kyler, it's risky. So, I might fade Kyler in the early rounds because I know the risk is – I would say it's 50-50. I still think the Cardinals aren't that great yet, but in the long term, yes. So, I think things if you're going early, you need to know that he is your quarterback for the whole year minus 1 week and minus injuries. You can't be taking Lamar, Mahomes, Russ, Dak and be I might stream Ryan Fitzpatrick this week because he plays the Jets, because then you're just counteracting your whole plan. And then in terms of I guess literally my strategies are I go quarterback early that I want, or I just take 3 at the end because like I said, there's no in between. If Matt Ryan's there in the 10, stuff like that, I obviously will take him. But I'm not intending to go quarterback once I pass up on the first really 3-4 guys in general.
Yeah, I've got 5. I've probably got 6 that I'd be willing to take inside the first 6 rounds just because I think Breeze gives you that same kind of floor. Mm-hmm. After that, I'm not taking anybody till 10, 12. I'll go late because I'm perfectly happy taking a Phillip Rivers after everybody else is well over and done with their quarterback drafting.
Absolutely.
And then I'll take a handful of them so that, if I've got the bench space, I can stream out of my 2 or 3 that I've taken later, that quarterback position, and I'm fine. I don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, so I think there's definitely a lot of room to improve. And we'll be attaching the strategy part to the end of each of these episodes at the beginning or whenever we want to decide to do them. So that was quarterbacks to avoid. Next week, we're just going to lay out the rest of the schedule. So next week, running backs, receivers, tight ends. So 4 weeks from today, we're going to be touching upon the coaching changes, something that you really, really like. I do too.
It is the Best thing that you can, it is the literal most impactful thing that there is in football and fantasy football. I can't fucking wait for those shows. I love that
You
research.
love it. And then we're going to go quarterbacks to target on down the tight ends. And then the 2 weeks before the season starts, we're going to be hitting AFC betting primer and an NFC betting primer, because we'll be doing shows like that in season. Those can tie directly into fantasy just as well. So it'll be kind of a mixture of a show in general. But we'll be doing that the 2 weeks before the season. And then in season, we'll have a whole new schedule for the whole channel, just because we have to, obviously, because football is hopefully going to be playing by then.
Fuck Fauci. We're playing football.
Let's do it. All right. We'll see you guys next week.